to our channel, Sleepy Chronicles. Before we begin our journey into the quiet, often overlooked corners of the past, I want you to take a moment to truly settle in. Adjust your position until every muscle feels supported. Pull your blanket up to a comfortable height and let your breathing slow down to a natural, steady rhythm. In this 5-part series, we are going to explore the unvarnished reality of human history, focusing on the grit, the exhaustion, and the small human details that the history books often leave out. Over the next 5 episodes, we will follow a continuous thread of human effort, starting today with the damp, heavy life of a medieval foot soldier, moving eventually through the rising stones of the Great Wall, the lonely trails of the Pony Express, and the delicate evolution of the violin. We are here to embrace the boring, the repetitive, and the real. If you find peace in these stories, please consider subscribing to the channel and liking this video, as it helps our sleepy community grow and allows us to keep bringing you these nighttime travels. Now, clear your mind of today's worries and let us step back into a world of mud and iron. You awaken not to a gentle sunrise or the song of birds, but to a sound that exists somewhere between a rusted horn and a man screaming the word march as if it owed him money. There is no snooze button in a military camp, no soft mattress to cling to, and no warmth to be found. There is only the damp, cold earth and the deep spiritual ache of having spent the night sleeping in your armor. As you try to stretch, you immediately regret the decision, as your chainmail has become one with your body, a heavy and cold secondary skin that refuses to let you move freely. Around you, a dozen other soldiers are stirring, each wearing a similar mask of regret and the early signs of trench foot. One man next to you is still asleep with his head resting on a helmet that has collected a significant amount of rainwater overnight. Another comrade is already awake, silently and carefully using a dagger to extract a persistent slug that has found a home in his boot. You find yourself staring at the gray sky, wondering if you should try to find breakfast or simply apologize to your internal organs for what is about to happen to them. Breakfast is what we might call a historically significant disappointment. It consists of a crust of bread that is so incredibly hard, you suspect it could actually deflect an arrow if you held it up. You chew it slowly, not out of any desire to savor the flavor, but because your jaw is still sore from yesterday's meager offerings. and you have to be careful not to break a tooth on a meal that was likely baked during the previous spring. You wash this down with a mouthful of warm ale, a necessity because the local water is a dangerous game of bacterial roulette that no sensible soldier wants to play. There is no time for personal grooming or even looking at your own reflection, which is likely for the best given that you haven't seen your own face in several weeks. You simply splash a handful of cold swamp water onto your cheeks to maintain the illusion of hygiene before strapping on the rest of your gear. The equipment smells of old sweat, damp wool, and a certain kind of fear that has been fermenting in the fabric for months. Then come the orders to form up and move out, yelled by a man on a horse who has clearly never had to walk a single mile in his entire life. The army begins to stir with a heavy, rhythmic clanking of iron. Someone is already limping because they made the mistake of stepping on a sharp rock while they were still barefoot. As you take your first steps, the mud sucks at your boots with a persistent, hungry force, as if the earth itself is trying to claim your soul, or at least your footwear. You haven't even made contact with the enemy yet, and you are already exhausted, damp, and hungry, feeling a vague but deep regret for every life choice that led you to this field. You trudge forward one squelching, miserable footstep at a time through ground that is less earth and more moist despair. Armor, as it turns out, was never designed for the long trudge of hiking. It pinches the skin, it rubs against your joints, and it makes you feel like a walking iron sausage being slowly roasted in your own sweat. The air around the column is a thick cocktail of livestock, cheap onions, and the general scent of unwashed bodies. You try to breathe through your mouth, but the taste of the air makes you regret that too. You pass the debris of the march, a broken cart or a discarded item, but no one stops because stopping is for people who enjoy being yelled at by the sergeant. Some men try to sing war songs to cope with the monotony, while others simply mutter prayers or scream into the wind to release the tension. You look at the stupid hill appearing in the distance and realize that every battle in history seems to take place at the top of one. And as you begin the ascent, you simply keep your head down and keep moving. This is the beginning of a very long journey, and the sun has only just begun to rise over the horizon. This is the beginning of a very long journey, and the sun has only just begun to rise over the horizon. You trudge forward, one squelching, miserable footstep at a time through ground that is less earth and more moist despair. The mud is no ordinary mud. It is the kind that sucks at your boots like it is trying to steal your soul, or at least your left foot. If you stop to adjust a strap, you instantly fall behind, drawing glares from the man behind you, whose face clearly says he might eat you if you slow him down again. Armor, you quickly learn, was never actually designed for hiking. It clanks, it pinches, and it rubs in places you didn't even know had skin. Your shoulders ache, your thighs burn, and your inner thighs are forming a violent alliance against you with every clanking step. You are essentially a walking iron sausage being slow roasted in your own sweat. The air smells like a heavy mixture of livestock, cheap onions, and the sharp tang of communal fear. Someone ahead passes gas with the kind of force that suggests they lost a battle with last night's turnip stew. And though you try to breathe through your mouth, you immediately regret that decision too. You pass a dead hedgehog, a broken cart, and what might be a human toe, but no one stops. Stopping is for people who enjoy being yelled at by the sergeant, a man whose entire personality is now defined by the fact that he never stops screaming. Morale is entirely non-existent. Some men sing war songs to cope, others mutter prayers, and one guy in the back just screams into the wind, which honestly helps everyone a little bit. At one point, you think that maybe the enemy will surrender before you even get there. But then you remember they are probably thinking the same thing, which means this is going to end with someone panicking, everyone stabbing, and you trying to remember which end of the spear goes where. After hours of this, a hill appears. Every medieval battle apparently takes place at the top of a stupid hill. As you begin the ascent, someone slips and rolls down, but no one helps because they are simply better off now. Eventually, you arrive at the place where you will not sleep tonight, the battle camp. It is less a base of operations and more an organized outbreak. There are tents for the nobility, but the rest of you get a patch of mud slightly less cursed than the rest of the field. Sen stake your spot by collapsing on the ground and calling it a bed. Your neighbor does the same, and congratulations, you have started a tiny trench community. The smell hits you next, a horrifying cocktail of wet wool, unwashed bodies, fermented boots, and whatever is rotting near the food cart. There is a buzz in the air that isn't excitement, just thousands of flies, some of which you have already given names to. Then there is the latrine, a shallow hole in the ground dug in haste and profound regret. There is no privacy. The smell is biblical, and everyone tries not to look each other in the eye. You are handed a bowl of stew that has only one flavor: gray. When you ask what is in it, the cook makes eye contact for 5 uncomfortable seconds before walking away. And you eat it anyway because you are starving. You hope whatever meat is in there didn't have a name 2 hours ago. Some men are sharpening weapons, others play dice, and a few are praying very loudly to make sure everyone sees them doing it, just in case God is offering extra protection to the dramatic ones. You hear hacking coughs, distant weeping, and a man singing off key about bread. Then a knight barks an order. He is clean and smells like lavender, and you hate him instantly. Night falls, and you curl up in your damp cloak next to a guy who snores like he swallowed a donkey. You try to sleep, but your brain is busy imagining all the ways you could die tomorrow, or tonight if that goat kicks you in the ribs again. And as you finally start to doze, a voice yells from the distance to form up at sunrise. Fantastic. Another beautiful morning awaits, and as dawn breaks, you feel the icy realization that you might die in a field before lunch, having never even brushed your teeth. This is the grind, the long wait before the lines finally meet and the world becomes a meat blender. Dawn breaks, and with it comes the icy realization that you are going to die in a field, probably very soon and possibly even before you have had the chance to think about lunch. You haven't even brushed your teeth. Not that you have a toothbrush or any teeth particularly worth saving at this point. The trumpets sound, a harsh and jarring noise that makes the men groan in collective exhaustion as you crawl out of your damp cocoon of lice, infested wool, to find your comrades already pretending to be motivated for the day ahead. You line up in rows because standing in straight lines makes people feel slightly more in control of impending doom. Even though it is a lie you can only shuffle into with numb feet and very questionable bowel control. Then he appears, the noble commander, a man wearing polished armor so clean it is practically glowing in the morning light. He has that specific kind of energy only people who have never actually been punched in the face tend to have, surveying the troops like a disappointed parent who just found out you joined the losing side of a local tavern brawl. He clears his throat, and everyone braces as he begins his speech about fighting for glory. Someone near you coughs up something that looks like it might be alive as the commander talks about the king, the lands, and honor. But the crowd only murmurs from stomach cramps rather than any real sense of patriotism. He tells you to look to your brothers and to look to your steel. But when you glance sideways, the man next to you is visibly shaking with his helmet on backward, and his steel is noticeably bent. The commander claims the enemy fears you, which they probably do not, as they likely have their own guy yelling the exact same things in another accent across the field. When he reaches the bit about dying as heroes, you suppress the urge to raise your hand and ask if you can die later as a baker instead. He tells you that God is on your side, which is reassuring, except for the fact that God has been busy smiting everyone equally this season. The speech ends with a sword thrust to the sky and a mighty shout to move forward. But no one actually moves at first. A few guys blink, and one guy sneezes, until the shouting continues long enough for someone to finally shuffle forward, and the rest of you reluctantly follow. You don't move out of conviction, but mostly because standing still means the commander might single you out for a volunteer job. And you have heard what happened to the last volunteer who caught his eye. Thus ends the pep talk, and you are now spiritually prepared to panic with a purpose. Now it is time to form ranks, a noble phrase that conjures images of precision and strategy, but actually results in a very confused clump of people, vaguely facing the same direction. Half of the men are still trying to put on their helmets, and some are holding weapons they just picked up 5 minutes ago. One guy is gripping a pitchfork, and you are pretty sure he is just here by accident after wandering away from his farm. Your sergeant, who was probably a pig farmer 3 years ago, starts barking numbers that no one understands, but everyone nods as if they do. You are ordered to form a shield wall, but the guy in front of you has his shield upside down and is using it to itch his back. To your left is a guy with a spear twice his height, who keeps poking people unintentionally. And to your right is a man humming a battle hymn that sounds suspiciously like a common folk song with different lyrics. Directly behind you is someone breathing heavily, like he has been practicing dramatic dying noises in advance. The cavalry is off to one side, with horses pawing the ground dramatically, and knights sitting tall in full plate armor that cost more than your entire village. You, meanwhile, are standing in borrowed boots and chainmail that smells like someone died in it, probably because someone did. There is a sudden order to move forward and tighten the line, which is easier said than done when every second man is stepping on someone else's foot, and the mud is threatening to swallow the smaller soldiers whole. Your feet slide, and someone elbows you as your shield ends up backwards, and you simply do not have the emotional energy to fix it. Then comes the drum beat, a slow and ominous thud that tells everyone it is about to start. Men start whispering prayers, and one man starts quietly sobbing while you take a deep breath and try not to pass out. You are as ready as anyone in a crooked line of terrified peasants can be, just when the formation starts looking somewhat believable. The sky betrays you. It begins with a sound, a soft and distant whoosh that becomes a collective whisper of doom. And the shouting starts for everyone to get their shields up. You scramble to obey, though someone nearby is still trying to figure out which end of the shield is up. And a moment later the sky darkens. It isn't clouds, but hundreds of tiny death sticks launched from the enemy side with alarming enthusiasm. The arrows rain down with all the mercy of an angry god having a very bad day. The man, too, rows ahead of you, drops instantly with an arrow sticking out of his shoulder like a forgotten quill, and someone screams while another curses. Arrows don't glide gracefully like in the movies. They thud and crack and bounce off armor before embedding themselves in things not meant to be pierced, like feet or emotional stability. You shrink behind your shield, which suddenly feels far too small and homemade, and decide that this shield is now your best friend. You mentally name it Gerald and whisper promises to it that you will never talk badly about its lopsided shape again if you survive. The second volley comes, and any illusion of calm has evaporated as veterans crouch low and new recruits cry openly. Eventually, the sky clears and you realize you are alive because Gerald did good. But now the real horror of close combat begins, which means it is time to get very sweaty and probably stabbed as the two armies finally prepare to collide. There is no countdown, no dramatic drum roll, and no theatrical charge like the ones found in the songs when the distance between the two armies finally vanishes. One moment you are trembling in your half-formed line, and the next all hell breaks loose as a surge begins. Your side moves forward, not with sudden courage, but with the reluctant momentum of men who know they will be trampled from behind if they hesitate for even a second. Someone ahead of you yells something meant to be inspiring, but they promptly trip and are stepped on by the weight of the crowd. You do not stop to help because you are fairly certain you will join him on the ground if you do. Then you hit the enemy literally, slamming into another human being like a sack of potatoes, colliding with another sack of potatoes that happens to be wearing sharp objects. You can forget any ideas of fancy sword play, because this is not a choreographed dance. It is a meat blender where you swing your weapon without aiming, because you simply do not have the time. You hear metal crashing and wood shattering as men grunt and flail about. The fighting is incredibly close and intimate, making you deeply aware of the smell of the enemy, which is a suffocating mixture of sweat, fear, and onions. There is no such thing as personal space in this panic. At one point, you stab downward and simply hope it was not your own foot, while your helmet fogs up until you can neither breathe nor see. Someone slams a shoulder into your ribs, and you both stumble sideways, gasping for air. There is blood on your gauntlet that might be yours or might belong to someone else, but it does not matter in the heat of the moment. A man swings a weapon at your head, and you duck out of reflex, causing him to hit someone else instead. You exchange a brief glance with him that is half apology and half shrug, because there is no time for blame, only for surviving. This is a bar fight at the world's worst tavern, with 500 angry men, and no one to break it up. It sounds more like a livestock market colliding with a blacksmith shop during an earthquake than any heroic symphony. The screaming is constant, coming not just from the wounded, but from the living who yell to psych themselves up, or because someone stepped on their foot. You hear the guttural bellows of men with axes, and the high-pitched, borderline apologetic whimper of a guy realizing he is wearing the wrong team's colors. Somewhere behind the lines, someone is shouting to hold the line, with all the hope of a man telling the tide to stop. But no one can hear him over the noise of maces making dull, horrifying thumps against soft faces. The worst sounds are the wet ones, such as the squelch of someone stepping in something that used to be a person, or the slurp of blood and mud mixing beneath your boots. These are the sounds that take up permanent residence in your nightmares. Most people in this battle die unseen, unheard, and from behind, usually killed by a guy who did not even know their name. You might fall from a shove, or by tripping over a severed limb, or by slipping on a combination of blood and someone's recently spilled breakfast. When you are down, you have about 3 seconds to choose between getting up to face the danger or staying down and hoping for the best. Getting up is dangerous because you become an upright target. But staying down means people might fall on you, or looters might poke you to see if you are truly dead. Many choose to lie still, breathing shallowly and praying that no horse or person steps on their spine. You survive by being the battlefield's most committed plank of wood, until the noise finally shifts from aggressive to exhausted. The field is now littered with bodies, and the occasional boot that is separated from its owner to rest politely atop a rock. Someone mumbles that you won with the enthusiasm of a man who just found out he gets to live, but only in a tent full of disease. Victory here just means not being dead yet, and dragging your bruised carcass back to camp past fallen friends who all share the same blank expression. You sit on a rock and whisper, "Never again," only to realize you will likely be called back for another skirmish next week, after the swords are sheathed and the groaning becomes the dominant soundtrack of the field. It is time for the least glamorous phase of combat, the cleanup. You might assume this means a respectful tending to the fallen, but in reality, it is a desperate mix of triage and looting where the materials are often body parts. The medics arrive, but these are simply men with bad eyesight and zero formal training who specialize in telling you that a limb must come off while you bite down on a wooden stick. You might sit with a sword gash on your thigh, watching a barber surgeon wave a needle near a candle to sterilize it, hoping the wine he is using was actually meant for the wound and not for his own nerves. Meanwhile, your fellow soldiers are busy salvaging equipment, which is merely a polite term for rummaging through the dead for anything that is not nailed down. You find that you need a new pair of boots, and you realize with a dull sense of practicality that your friend Gregor does not need his anymore. By nightfall, the living stumble back to the camp, covered in mud, and a growing suspicion that the worst is still ahead. You find your spot, a patch of earth that is slightly less swampy than the rest, and collapse with the grace of a dropped sack of onions. Around you, wounded men groan, and others pray to every god they can remember just to be safe. The cook ladles out something that is emotionally still considered soup, though it has the consistency of regret, and you eat it without shame, because your dignity was lost somewhere between the fifth arrow volley and the sight of a panicked warhorse. You try to sleep, but your brain is far too busy processing the fact that you survived by being the battlefield's most committed plank of wood, pretending to be a corpse while the chaos swirled above you. As the fire burns low, the final phase of the battle begins, the rewriting of history. Filthy, traumatized men sit on damp logs and try to outdo each other with stories that grow more questionable by the minute. In your version of the story, you did not trip over a body and scream in terror. Instead, you tell the others that you strategically repositioned yourself. You skip the part where you begged a squire to hold your hand during the arrow storm, because everyone around the fire is doing the same thing, turning their trauma into a legend they can live with. For one night, there is warmth, there is bread, and there is the camaraderie of men who know exactly how much of your story is false, because their own stories are just as invented. You lived through it barely and miraculously, and for now, that is enough. Now, as the echoes of the distant march fade and the campfires of the past turn to ash, it is time for you to let go of the weight of the day. Your own long journey is over, and you are safe, warm, and far removed from the cold mud of the field. Feel the support of your bed, and let your breath become slow, deep, and effortless. If you found peace in these chronicles of the unpolished past, please consider subscribing to the channel and liking the video to help our sleepy community grow. Rest your mind and let your body sink into total relaxation. You have done enough for today. Sweet dreams and good night.